Growth mindset is really kind of what problems or profits really signifies. Because the way I look at it is when you purchase this investment, it's going to keep spitting off cash in the future. And especially if it's a quality asset like real estates, like good stocks, a lot of times you can leverage back off of that. So I don't look at investing even as spending. I look at it as just like almost like a safer place to put money versus like a bank account. The wealthy do tend to tilt a lot more into the networking side of things.
If you're always being frugal, I think it's almost the antithesis of scaling, right? Because frugality and being cheap go so close to that gray line. Like they're so close on a line that it's scary to me.
Problems are what? Problems are profits!
All right, guys, welcome back to the Problems or Profits podcast. Today, we got a special guest, Dylan McLauchlan, who is one of the very first people I met actually when I came to London and started working with Matt. Dylan was actually the guy who really showed me some of the more fundamental things that I know about wholesaling and stuff. So welcome to the podcast, Dylan. And we are joined today by, of course, Rebecca Lynn Matheson, and I have hijacked Matt McKeever's seat on the podcast. So I'm going to try and keep it engaging for you guys. And the way we're going to do that is by starting off with some warm-up questions and a bit of philosophy on problems or profits. So my mindset or my idea behind problems or profits, and if you've seen some of our gear, I actually created that gear with the just problems over the profits. And one of the things that I think is super important to focus on when you're thinking about problems or profits is it's a mindset that should take you through a decision matrix of how you go through your life and your business. Like I think problems or profits extends far beyond just day-to-day operations in your actual business. And what I think about problems or profits is, you know, so many things happen to you during a day. Not all of them are good. In fact, a lot of the things could be seen as hurdles, right? Or things that are going to slow you down. And one of the things that's kind of got us to the success that we've had today is simply just using all of those hurdles as learning opportunities and just not stopping the growth between your professional self and your personal self. So I'm talking about your romantic relationships, your professional relationships, your relationships with your suppliers or service providers, your tenants, potentially, if you guys are into the real estate investing. All of these hurdles and all of these challenges that you face really are just preparing you for the next interaction that you have. And most of these problems I find are fairly fundamental in that they will recur, right? Most problems are generally not novel or unique. I think most problems have either been seen by you before, or you'll see them again, or certainly they've been seen by somebody else. So you're not in a vacuum, right? This is not going to be the first time you see a problem. So the best course of action is to learn from that thing so that you're better equipped to deal with it the next time it shows up. So that's my philosophy on problems or profits. And that's sort of how we kick this podcast off every time. So if this is your first episode, go back and listen to Rebecca's take on it and Matt's take on it. But yeah, Dylan, welcome to the podcast. And we wanted to warm you up with the question of what's the most expensive thing you've ever broken?
The most expensive thing I've ever broken. That's a good question. I would say it would probably have to be vehicles or cars. And I use that plural as well. I'm not the best at car maintenance and car upkeep. I think everyone has their thing. Even with my background being in construction and maintenance, things like that, you'd think I'd have some proclivity, but something about working on cars, working on vehicles, I guess it's different too. If you've got a nice luxury piece, a luxury car that you really take a lot of pride in. But for me, a lot of my vehicles have kind of been work vehicles. And so from getting point A to point B. So yeah, it's like you end up neglecting the maintenance. And that's the thing. To relate to problems or profits in some ways, you neglect some of the little indicators, which are kind of like micro problems, if you would. And then those kind of typically end up leading into a big problem, a bit of a catastrophe. So yeah, having to replace vehicles where I could have maybe gotten a few more years of lifespan, or even a lot of guys in our network, some of the more frugal guys, even have interesting investing strategies around vehicles where you're able to drive it for many years, even luxury vehicles, drive them for many years and then resell them later. So, losing out on some money, losing out on some equities by driving them to the end of their lifespan and then just selling them to the scrapyard. But yeah, I don't know. We all have our things, right?
I do seem to recall a silver car with a black hood that certainly didn't seem to match.
Yeah. Tell people carbon fiber and
yeah. That's awesome, man. That's super cool.
I love that.
Well, I think this maybe is an interesting transition into our second warm-up question, which is maybe of a completely different nature. But what if you had $1 million and 24 hours to spend it, and it would completely disappear after that 24 hours? What would you do?
All on Bitcoin or Doge, depending on where they sit. No, I'm just kidding. That's a really good question, man. I like that a lot. Yeah. I think that's the thing. A lot of my big proclivity is to invest a lot of funds if I do have it. That's kind of like whenever I see big chunks of money, that's like the first thought, like, what can I invest this in? Because the way I look at it is when you purchase this investment, it's going to keep spitting off cash in the future. And especially if it's a quality asset like real estates, like good stocks, a lot of times you can leverage back off of that. So I don't look at investing even as spending. I look at it as just like almost like a safer place to put money versus like a bank account, things like that. So that's really where my head does go to a lot. But if it couldn't be an investment kind of thing, if it had to be spent, you had to buy things, I think it would be really just with $1 million, it's kind of a lot to tackle. I think it would really just be going through kind of the Maslow hierarchy of needs and upgrading my lifestyle things from there, right? So you have like food and shelter, then you have like, I guess, securities, things like that. Then you have community. So, upgrading my place of residence, upgrading, maybe picking up a bunch of good food, supplements, supplies like that, upgrading some of the hardware that I use that I like to use to keep track of life, upgrading computer, cell phone, stuff like that. And I think it would go through, but $1 million's quite a bit to burn in a 24-hour period. So I'm sure near the end of that day, we'd get into some more fun. So, yeah.
So I guess if shelter was at the bottom of the stack there, would you stay in London? Would you stay where you're at? Would you totally look at different areas?
That's a good question, man. I guess it depends on the levels, right? And I thought about this maybe more my current level. I really enjoy London. I actually love London. I feel like it's such a nice, like, kind of middle density city where there's a lot of cool things to do, lots of cool people, but it doesn't feel too busy. Like everything feels super accessible. Even like I've noticed the difference with certain activities, right? I'll use an example. I used to be really into gymnastics, and like the London gymnastics scene was like super chill, super inviting, super accommodating. But then and sometimes our London scene would go to Toronto for their meetups there. But then once you get to the Toronto scene, then you got like 200 people meetups, and you've got people that are actually like, Cirque du Soleil people and like high level. So it's a little bit intimidating because you kind of, to be in the same room as those people who develop their whole life around the hobby is a little crazy. So I love London. I think I would definitely stay in London. I think I'd probably diversify, you know what I'm saying? Like have spot in London, maybe a little crib in like Toronto, GTA, more of a city, then have, I haven't been doing much traveling lately, but that's kind of in the next couple of years. I want to start branching out, traveling a bit more. And I do love seeing some of the people in our network who have now started, investing in little vacation homes near Bali, like buying like little off-grid camping spots. Even Central America, a bunch of the people investing in there, buying different properties down there. I love the Central America. A bunch of my buddies have been traveling there over this year, and I'm so jealous of that. So I think, diversifying in a bunch of locations. I kind of I don't need like one crazy mansion. I want to be able to jump around, pick and choose where you want to be at when.
Well, if you're going to Toronto, you could probably at least get yourself a nice 25 by 50 lot, and no building, but you could get the lot for that $1 million.
Park, right? Yeah,
that's camping, right?
Yeah,
maybe a condo, maybe. Awesome. Okay, before we move on to the next warm-up question, I have to ask. So we started off the conversation with cars, and I love hearing everyone's old car story. I had a 2002 Toyota Corolla named Gertrude, so I'm sure you've got some stories with hearing the description of your car. But you mentioned upgrading things. So what would you upgrade your car to?
Oh, that's a tough one. I've just been thinking a little bit of this. I'm not a huge car guy. I do love the Teslas for the self-driving. I think that is so cool. Like if I could have like one thing about a car that would be a game changer, be self-driving amongst all else. I also do and I think that's kind of like in the, like $50,000 kind of price range. Up to the $100,000 price range, I would definitely be looking at I really like I think the Porsches, kind of like a Porsche 911 or something like that, have just a really classy kind of look. Once again, it would be way out of my price range as like a daily driver, something frequent, and especially if things went wrong with it. And then then if you're going into like the $250,000 price range, you know, it would be fun to have like a super exotic, like a Lamborghini, something like that, just to flex. But you know, once again, you see guys with those cars, and you see the stories where like a rad blows on it, and all of a sudden they're dropping like $10,000 or like $5,000 to $10,000 to fix all that stuff. So, you know, that's definitely some next level stuff that kind of scares me a little bit, but it sure would be cool. I think maybe renting more of those super exotics would be a lot of fun. So yeah, that'd be that's the full description.
Nice. I am here to tell you, I love the self-driving feature on my Tesla. It is freaking, it is sick. I used it the other day. I 100% let that thing drive me home the other day from Toronto, and I was the happiest human being on the planet for those few hours. I literally was just so in love with the idea. I was super tired after a flight and stuff, and it was just awful. And I was like, you know what? You know what's way safer and way better for everybody's sake right now? The car can just drive. And it was pretty cool. So I watched
a podcast the other day. A dude was doing a long trip like that, self-driving, smoking a cigar, shooting a podcast. And I watched that, and I'm like, yo,
that's it. Yeah, that's a wrap. Super. Okay, Dylan. Next question here for the warm-up is, why are you you?
Why am I me? Whoa.
Yeah, loaded.
We're getting deep. We're getting metaphysical here. Why me? I mean, I guess really break down, it's like nurture and nature, right? So we all have our things that we were kind of like born inclinations, things like right from the get-go we were super interested in and wanted to do and were interested in. And then also there's a lot of interesting experiences that I've had that I can kind of trace through to different levels of my development. It's very interesting too nowadays because, I don't know, I guess I'm dating myself here. We're all in different generations. Being in the millennial generation, there's definitely, we had this big explosion of internet and connectivity. And I think we were kind of one of the earlier generations to really be able to have benefits of that. You know, like the Y generation maybe had some of that, but everything was still super anonymous, like the old message boards, things like that. So like I can actually trace back a lot of things in my development through different online communities that I was a part of, that I was networking in. And it's interesting because you almost see how one jumps from the other. Like, you know, back in the day, I was really into skateboarding, and there was like a whole skateboarding forum. I got really into that. And then from that, people were recommending like health and fitness boards and things like that. Jumped over to that and started learning about health and fitness, exercise. And then that jumped over to entrepreneurship and business and kind of got more into that. And even actually, interesting story, the whole way I ended up meeting Matt McKeever and a lot of great investors in our London areas through Bigger Pockets, so an online real estate community. So messaging people there. So, you know, they always say you're the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with or you pay the most attention to. And I think it's interesting because in today's day and age, it's so easy to meet those people, to find those people. To even like you talk online like we're doing right now and spend time together. You know, it's interesting to have that ability because by cultivating that, you can choose the direction of your own development. So.
Damn. Yeah, I think the connectivity piece is something that actually I don't think anybody's really mentioned on this podcast so far, but it is such a unique characteristic of where we're at today, right? It's so part of our lives that it's almost absurd. I mean, I'm literally sitting in front of 3 screens right now and a phone, and the phone's here, like it's open too. Like I'm just here waiting just in case, you know, there's any back channel or anything like that. So it's just like, it's incredible how connected we are. And this is how we met as well, right? We had met from an online listing that presented the Weibo limo tour to my friend Michael. And then Michael ran into that and he texted me and then said, hey, let's go to this thing. And I said, okay, sure. And then we meet you guys, Jeff Weibo, Matt McKeever. And then I go home and I watch like 300 of Matt's videos. And instantly I have this relationship, and albeit it was one way, but I have this instant relationship with Matt and his mindset and his content and what he was currently thinking about. And then I had the opportunity to really digest that, think about what are my thoughts on this person and his words, and then make the leap, the giant leap almost of just saying, hey man, I really connect with what you're saying. And I would love to do more of that. in person or at a different level of relationship. And I think that's so cool, because at what time could you ever build your tribe online one way, or even from our perspective, one to many, now that we're creating the content, one to many? How crazy is it that you can build your tribe online before you ever even need to meet the person, and then decide whether or not you want to spend more time with that person based on their ideas and their presentation and their who you think that they are? It's really fascinating. So that's a cool point to bring up.
Yeah, actually, and even to kind of go on that too, it's really mind blowing, because if you think about like the past 2,000 years, everything was such long form. Like the only other way to download somebody's thoughts would be to read a book, which you're not really getting a true understanding of that person. Sure, you're getting their writing style and things like that, but like, you know, people don't talk the same way they write a book. A book will be very formal, especially the amount of effort and time you have to put to crystallize everything. So you're not really getting an idea of the person. But then really after the year 2000, when people are doing like these casual podcast conversations or online video where you're really finally getting an idea of a person's personality, right? Like, yeah, this is one of the first times in history we've been able to do this. So it's important to leverage it. Yeah, like you guys are doing.
100%. And it is so cool that you brought that up too, with the connectivity piece in that online community. Because actually, Dylan, this is the first time we're talking kind of face to face, if you will. But the first time that I came across you was actually the first time that I was really exposed fully and thoroughly to wholesaling, because I watched your course on wholesaling that you had filmed and created, and I got an idea of when you were starting in that niche, you kind of presented all the information and how you're going about your business at the time. So it was really cool to see that and be able to really share in knowledge, and that's something that technology has really allowed us to do, is just that constant access to knowledge and information. And one thing that I want to do to get started here in the podcast is just for all of the listeners who maybe haven't been exposed to you in the past, Dylan, is just have you give a little overview as to who you are, what your business model is, and just kind of why you do what you do.
Cool. Yeah. So anyways, yeah. Dylan McLauchlan, I'm 30 years old. I've been investing in real estate for around the past 8 years. So I kind of got started investing when I was 20 years old. And so at the time, I was studying to become an electrician, going through the apprenticeship program here in Ontario, Canada. And so I had a little bit of experience renovating. I had a bit of an entrepreneurial background, because back in the day, like I was saying, going on forums, trying to learn about, online websites, Google AdWords, things like that, different methods. I ended up figuring out or finding out about real estate. And it was around the time, because I was looking to move out, ended up purchasing my first place, and started as a rental property. And so through then, I've kind of just been developing my strategies and my skills as a real estate investor. I mostly specialize in the BRRRR strategy, so the classic buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. And I've been doing that. Usually do a couple deals a year, and have since tried to scale the size of buildings I'm doing, as well as the volumes of buildings and or projects I'm doing. And then during that time as well, Rebecca, you mentioned kind of the wholesaling. So I did do a lot of wholesaling as well back in the past, kind of like midway through my career, linked up with Matt McKeever, and we started working on wholesaling together. So was doing that for a while, still kind of run some of those strategies in terms of finding deals to be able to add to my portfolio, to be able to improve them, invest them, and ultimately hold them to give myself a kind of long-term passive income in the background while I either double down on that strategy or continue to pursue other interests and strategies. So yeah, that's what I've been doing the past little bit. Currently I've scaled up to, I have 9 properties, which works out to about 25 units. And then half of my portfolio is student rentals right now. And that's kind of how I got my start doing the student rental BRRRRs, which can be a lot of fun and can be a little bit crazy. And so if you count the student tenants, because sometimes I'll have like 5 to 6 tenants per property, I have just over 50 tenants that I manage. So it's kind of, now it's gotten past the point where I know everyone off the bat on a first name basis, which is kind of that scale. So I'm currently enjoying that a lot. Still looking to increase that strategy, scale up. The market's really crazy right now, so it does get more difficult to find some of the deals that fit your criteria. That's one of the kind of problems I'm going through right now. But on the other side of it, there's a lot of profit associated with that because buildings have appreciated. So there's a lot of equity sitting around. So you end up having a little bit more gunpowder to play with. So yeah, that's kind of where things are at.
That's cool. I'm going to share a problems or profits story right now with the world. And Dylan, I don't think you'll even know about this story, but it involves you. At one point, very early in our relationship and my career in real estate investing, I had actually approached you because I was looking at building building my portfolio. And I think maybe I just had my first property. And I came to you, and I remember it was one of your buildings. We met up in like the laundry area. I think you were collecting some coins there or something like that. Yeah. And I approached you and actually asked you for a loan on some properties. And you very politely and respectfully said, fuck no, in much nicer terms. But it's actually one of my problems or profit stories that I think about from time to time. It was one of the more valuable no's that I've ever got in my life, because I took that no and I was like, fuck, that would have been so easy. It would have been so good if that loan had just gone through. But the reality was that I had to call a lot of people after that no. And that was one of the first ones. And it actually set me up for success, because I was like, okay, if Dylan's a no, and Dylan's one of the only people that I know better than like any of these people, right? Which wasn't a lot anyways, but better than anyone else in the network. It literally set me up so that every other no didn't really matter after that. And I ended up asking a lot of people and eventually got that small loan. I think it was 50,000 or something unsecured I was looking for. And it was just like, it set me up so well for success to go and take the hard no's and translate those into just lessons learned on the idea that, this is really a volume game or a contact sport, and you've just got to keep asking and keep driving forward. And from that no, I took that and transitioned it into a lot of units, right? Like a crazy amount of units in a small time. And then actually just this year basically sold everything. But recently we just picked up another 25 units. But it's just like, oh my God, like that no was probably one of the harder and first ones that set me up for so much success later to just like keep pounding doors, right? I think it even fueled me to go out and wholesale harder. Right? Because it would have been so easy to just borrow easy money and buy that next building and then potentially get a little bit more complacent or think that it was easy to do. But instead it was like, no, now I got to go wholesale my ass off and actually figure out how to do that skill, right? Fix my skills so that money's not a problem, particularly not like a small sum like that, to the point where now it's like easy. It's very easy now to go and like, just pick up the phone and make $100,000 as a wholesaler in a month or something like that, and then just go and buy that thing. But it all starts, I think, with those hard conversations and with those hard no's. And I think some of the times, like, people don't even know they're part of that story, right? And it's really cool to have those stories, and they almost feel like failures at the time. You're like, oh no, I failed to pitch this person, or I failed to build that relationship or whatever. But what it really is just you're not yet ready, and you need to take those failures and just fail forward. So cool story for this podcast that I wasn't planning, but I just thought of it. So
I'm glad you flipped my no into a positive, brother.
100%.
I apologize again for not being able to lend, but I'm glad that it all worked. But that speaks volumes, right? I think it's the people that are able to, even success can be easy for some, and it's more challenging for others in certain ways. But it's really the ones who have repeated success are the ones that go through that adversity and learn to reward themselves through it. And then they can take that success model and repeat it in other areas as well, right? Like, because like you said, like that's lending money, but then that taught you about wholesaling, that same commitment. And I'm sure that can be translated to many other areas. So yeah, no, that's cool stuff.
No, 100%. And it's not a sorry, it's a thank you note, right? Like that's literally a thank you note. And that's, I think, the spirit really of problems or profits. Like you can't say you've got the problems or profits mentality without truly like thinking that. Like that's literally one of the things that helped launch me into the skills that I have today. So I'm super happy about it.
Awesome.
And like the other thing too, I guess I'll just throw in here is like, obviously you never know somebody else's situation. Like I could have come to you the day that you literally had just outlaid, $200,000 on a reno or something crazy, right? Or you had just bought something. Like, again, I think it's important and I'm just using Dylan because he's here and the story is easy to leverage, but like you don't know that person's situation. So when somebody tells you no, it's probably not a character attack. Like if you think that you've been respectful to that person, you've built the relationship, they're not saying no to your character. They're saying no to any number of things. And that goes too with your potential sellers, right? If you're looking at private deals and they're saying no to your offer. Well, there might be more to that story. Like you actually need to uncover somebody else's motivation and their why. And you have to also be able to satisfy it, right? Just knowing it's not enough. You have to also have the other half of the equation in order to make it come together as a deal. And I think that's not always inherent, right? That's not a given.
Exactly. I think that touches on a huge point too that I kind of really want to share. Has been fascinating me a lot. And Rebecca, feel free to cut me off because I tend to be verbose with my descriptions of things. But what you're describing, Adam, really a lot of it lines up so perfectly with a growth mindset, which is basically like the cornerstone of mindset research, right? That's where the term mindset even got coined by Carol Dweck, the author of Mindset. And so growth mindset is really kind of what problems or profits really signifies, right? Because at the end of the day, like you were saying, you never have a guarantee of your outcome. You never know if that person you're asking, they could be having a terrible day, just went through a breakup, just lost a ton of money, and then they're just going to be a default no. So even if you do everything perfectly, read all the books, implement all the strategies, something still might not go your way. So when you're too attached to the outcome, you think it's all about your fixed mindset of like, well, I'm this good, I should get that outcome. It's never guaranteed. And so it's the people with that growth mindset that realize that every no, every other problem is just an opportunity to get better. Well, those are the people that end up having that long-term success, right? Because, and fundamentally, it's really shifting the mindset of like, actually celebrating some of the problems. It's hard to do, right? You never want to celebrate a problem when you get it or celebrate the effort of struggling through the problem, but that's really what growth mindset is at its core. And so, and I think that's one of the key cornerstones of success for a ton of individuals.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I definitely appreciate, Adam, your story here, and Dylan, some of your takeaways here with the growth mindset. And something that I was thinking about while you were talking about that in terms of like going and getting to the no and going out and hustling is that idea of either being given the fish or learning how to fish. And that's really what that set Adam up to do in this scenario. Was he wasn't just handed the fish. He wasn't just handed the money. He then got the no, and then he had to learn how to raise capital. Like he learned a skill set in that moment through that no that allowed him to go out there and develop the skill set of raising money, of building his business. And I think that that's such an invaluable lesson that time and time again will come back to service you in your business. And something that I wanted to highlight there as well that Dylan said is really always having that growth mindset. When you have those failures that hit you, when you have those no's, when you go out and you try and do something and you catch something unexpected, it's so important that you either win in that scenario or you learn and you continue to move forward with lessons learned. And I just really love that mindset of just continuing to push on no matter what.
Yeah, it's like telling yourself like, well, this problem came up, but I'm going to learn how to solve it. And then this problem will never bother me again because I've learned how to solve it, or, maybe you've got practice solving it multiple times. And then, that thought, that mental dialogue, I think is very powerful to have. Yeah.
So what are some of the problems you're encountering right now in your business? Like, what do you think your biggest problem is?
Right now, I would say the biggest problem is, I've been talking with Matt and joking a little bit about it, is outsourcing things, hiring people on and trying to scale in that method. Because really it becomes a necessity at a certain point where you have to start outsourcing people. And it's funny, previously I was doing a lot of outsourcing individuals and then kind of more micromanaging them, just being kind of the manager. But then it becomes difficult because really you have like your three hats, right? You have your technician where you're the one doing the work. You have kind of the middle one where you're the manager and it's like working in the past. If you follow the E-Myth, you're seeing things, you're managing people, inventory, resources. And then you have the entrepreneur at the other side, which is, forward thinking, future growth. And so I ended up having to take on much more of a management role, managing a bunch of people. It takes a lot of time, so you don't really have as much time to be an entrepreneur, that you have to be. And then also, if you want to do any technician stuff, well, then you're working 2 jobs, you have no time. And so then I've been trying to now outsource managers into my company. So GCs, people with more of a company that will have people underneath them that can start solving more problems at scale. And one of the things about that is that when you hire on those people, when you hire on businesses to go underneath you, you end up inheriting their problems. So, if you have business managers or GCs that are having a hard time managing their own finances or get tight for money, then they're asking for progress draws at different times. So yeah, it's interesting because you really have to solve those problems for yourself initially. And then you have to be super disciplined, because then these people you hire underneath you are going to bring up their problems again, and it's just going to, and then you're going to have to deal with that problem again. So if you haven't solved it in an elegant way yourself, then it's just going to hit you even harder. So I think that's the biggest thing right now: learning how to scale up, learning how to delegate, learning how to hire the right people. And then, yeah, some of the solutions I've been learning more of the solutions. The solution is really, you do have to pay a little bit more for quality, or find ways to incentivize some of those people better with either more equity, more skin in the game, or things of that nature, which can be tough, especially if you're a really frugal person. If you've got a frugal mindset and you're used to doing things at a very low cost, you notice that the price you pay will end up going up a lot. But at the same time, if you're able to do that effectively, the quality of your products go up, and also your ability to scale and get things done go up as well. Kind of in lockstep with that cost increase. So that's a bit of the game now that I'm playing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of my biggest regrets with our company was not hiring more people sooner. And certainly, and we reflected on this in one of the earlier podcasts with Aaron Bay. One of my biggest regrets was not getting out of my own way sooner too, to just delegate a lot of the decision making and most of the tactical. Like literally almost all of the tactical needs to be taken care of by somebody that's far better at it anyways than you will ever be, right?
Yeah.
Like, and we reflected on this, I think, in the earlier podcast. Like, I will never be as good as Natalie on our team, who writes all of our paperwork now, right? She's just going to do it faster, more efficiently, and in a more accurate manner than I ever will. So I should never do that task, right?
Yeah.
Even when it's easy for me to do it. No, just don't do it. Right? Rebecca sells the deals. I will never be as good as Rebecca at packaging the sales package, for example. So I should never do that. But that takes a lot because you're releasing information into the world that is a reflection of yourself as the leader, or in your case, as the property owner or the owner of the project. Like, when the project's done, the people on the outside may not be thinking about the drywaller who did the work. They might just be thinking, oh, Dylan's project looks like X, right? And so that is where I think ego is one of those deadly things that ultimately can get in the way of you making these hard decisions to delegate. But that is one of my biggest regrets in not doing, and what I think held us back for a long time. And I reflected on this in the last podcast. We actually did our entire last year in the first quarter of this year. And I attribute a lot of that to making hard and fast decisions to hire a bunch of people and then get the hell out of their way, right? Yeah. Let the guys do what the guys need to do. Empower Rebecca to make Rebecca decisions, right? And just get out of everybody's way. But one thing I also learned in terms of the actual hiring is we have taken sort of and this is going to almost sound like a contradiction to what I literally just said, which is unfortunate, but we in the past took more of a shotgun approach to who we would hire. And now I think that we tried that out. We actually got a decent amount of people, and we had to sort of sort through, if you will, sort the wheat from the chaff there and kind of get rid of some of the people that we hired. But at the same time, we're taking away some killers. And now we're taking a much more focused and directed approach where we might interview or do like a one-to-many webinar about hiring and then have 100 people there, but only come away with one candidate that we even like. Right. And then maybe or maybe not hire that person. So I found too that a one-to-many approach is really good. Like, we just hosted webinars on hiring people for our team, and like all these salespeople from random industries joined the webinar, and most of them suck. So we never hire them. And then of the few people that don't suck, we then grill them on a bunch of different things and force them to jump through some hoops that suck. One other thing I'm going to just comment on here that you mentioned, which has always been it's been a difference in mindset between Matt and myself, and Matt's general network as I knew it as we started, which was this frugality mindset, right? I think that frugality gets you very, very far, but at a certain point, it just needs to be discarded, in my opinion, because if you're always being frugal, I think it's almost the antithesis of scaling, right? Because frugality and being cheap go so close to that gray line. Like they're so close on a line that it's scary to me. And so sometimes it's hard to know which one you're being. And one of the things that changed in our company is when Matt just basically gave me control of the company for the wholesaling business, I instantly went insane on incentives and bonuses and compensation, like in a strategic kind of way to set it up so that it was all performance based. But at the same time, the guys did so much more business because they had a reason, right? They had a why that they were really trying to achieve. So like we bought them suits and watches and all sorts of crazy stuff. And this year we're going to go way crazier. But I think that because we're going way crazier, these guys literally are doing more work, right? They're working on a Sunday, right? They're sending me, we're sending Natalie offers to be done at 11 p.m. last night, right? And it's because they've got this deadline. They've got this goal they're trying to hit. And I just don't think you can get there by being frugal. I think it doesn't always work. I think frugality is one of those things like putting your oxygen mask on. Like you should do it. And then you should immediately go and like get the fuck off the plane, right? Once it lands, like, why are you still on the plane with your oxygen mask? So I think that's where we might have two different sort of approaches, but it's interesting to see how those can collaborate, right? Like you have to be frugal sometimes or you'll just blow it, right? You'll lose everything or you won't build something. So it'd be interesting to hear your take on that. Like at what point do you think you should discard frugality?
Yeah, that's a good one, man. There's an interesting saying that I love, and it's basically your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness.
Yeah.
And so I find, with the frugality, it's a double-edged sword, right? It cuts both ways. But I agree with everything you're saying, man. It's the interesting thing because one way that I can kind of encapsulate it is that, earlier on at the beginning of this podcast, I was saying like, well, I always think about investing. And really, like, if you're spending a ton of money in your business, that's investing. And that's probably the best asset to invest in is yourself and or your own business. So, it's actually like the smarter move. It's actually more frugal to invest into your business and to spend and to see that return. So yeah, I completely agree with your take on that, man. And it's learning about that and being comfortable doing that and jumping in and being able to. So yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, that's some cool stuff.
Well, that's an interesting framing because you just framed the spending I would have done in the business context as a frugal move, which I wouldn't have had that thought before either. So that's actually an interesting take on how that could look more frugal than anything because technically it's just recycling the money back into the business venture.
Yeah, it's just investing, right? And you're going to build a more robust business. You're investing in your in the employees of your business. You're going to get more buy-in. You're going to have people working harder. So yeah, at the end of the day, you could easily run the numbers in a spreadsheet as an investment and still be like, yeah, no, it all pencils. I'm being frugal, everything. Yeah. So yeah, that's the real way to do it. It's having that awareness. It's being able to track or having that feel, so that gut feel to be able to go for it. And so no, I love that. Yeah, it's good. It's good to hear those takes on it and those different stories and be able to kind of bring them together. I love it.
That's sweet. How much value do you place on the people in your network?
Oh, that's a good one. I place a lot of value on the people, and now I do know there is a lot of talk about how it's interesting. It's all about who you know, and I do agree with that to an extent. I remember seeing kind of an interesting breakdown between like people who are poor, people who are kind of middle class, and like the wealthy. And the wealthy do tend to tilt a lot more into the networking side of things. When you look at these, like if you think about, let's just go crazy, like people like the Rothschilds and the Koch brothers and the people who really control the world, right? A lot of it is through networking. It's through favors with other experienced individuals, and it's from learning and having that insider access. I still think you do need to be a high value individual yourself as well to be able to network with those people. And so I think part of it is kind of building that up and maybe just shifting the lens on myself, right? I'm 28 years old, and so I still feel like I'm in kind of an area of my life where I still see my potential in the future, and I'm still shooting towards this potential, who I want to become as a high value individual, that is somebody that can just attract people by virtue of my own skills and my own personality. So I think that's super important too. But yeah, almost, man, so it literally is almost a 50-50 because, on one end, you're going to attract people naturally being high value, but then on the other end too, like being around the high value people, that's going to be motivating. That's going to show you the way to do things. That's going to build you up as well. So yeah, I would say, I guess like the 50-50 is really a good way to kind of break it up in terms of like, yeah. And although I think you could argue even more easily for the network, you could argue that more than 50% value. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a cool hot take on it. And the reason why I ask you this is because for those that don't know Dylan, he is almost certainly one of the most well-read people that I know, or at the very least, one of the most capable at recalling everything that he's read. And maybe there's a big distinction there. But I know that like you're extremely well educated and well read on like the technical side of things. Like I don't think there would be much you wouldn't be able to spit back at us right now about mindset or about even just technical investing, right? Like I'm sure you have all that under wraps. So that was an interesting take just on what value you place on the actual network itself. So yeah, dude, thank you so much for coming on today. I think this is a valuable discussion for anybody that hasn't met you, just to kind of get introduced to you and some of your thoughts. And I had a good time catching up as well and sharing just that one story of an interaction that potentially could have been seen as a problem that actually turned into a huge profit. So bit serendipitous that we were both on this podcast today and not Matt, but I hope you had a fun time with us here today too, Dylan. And thanks again for coming.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
No worries.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on to the Problems or Profits podcast. Now, Dylan, where can people find you if they want to reach out and connect?
Yeah, so I'm a pretty easy guy to follow on social media, just at Dylan McLauchlan over here. Facebook, Instagram, anything like that. Feel free to give me a follow and reach out if you have any questions or want to get to know me.
Or if you want a quick no on a loan.
Yeah. Yeah, yes or no, it'll be quick. Don't worry about that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, Dylan, and we'll stay tuned on the next one.